In the domain of genuine love, one does not seek possession. This is a great misunderstanding of the modern psyche, which so often mistakes intensity for truth and desire for destiny. When a man truly loves a woman not as an object of desire, but as an expression of the divine feminine, the anima within he is no longer merely loving her as she appears externally. He is engaging in a sacred inner process. She becomes the mirror of his soul, the threshold through which he may glimpse the lost, unlived parts of himself. Love, then, is not a conquest, but an initiation into the self. It is in this moment of soul recognition that something profoundly paradoxical happens. The man who loves deeply may retreat, not because the love has weakened, but because the soul, when confronted with its own wholeness, trembles. To see oneself in another with such clarity can be too great a light, and as the myth of Icarus teaches us, the nearness to the sun can burn those who are not yet ready. Thus, disappearance is not necessarily abandonment, it can be metamorphosis. The caterpillar, too, disappears before it becomes the butterfly. When the man withdraws, he is not always fleeing from the woman, but from the image of himself that she evokes. She may embody qualities of tenderness, chaos, beauty, or even danger archetypes which live in the deeper layers of his unconscious. This confrontation with the anima archetype may disrupt his carefully maintained ego identity, awakening shadows he has long repressed. It is here that many confuse love with pain, not realizing that the suffering is not from love, but from the dismantling of illusions love demands. This withdrawal, this vanishing, is not the end. It is the beginning of a descent into the underworld of the psyche, a journey toward individuation. When a man loves you and then disappears, he may be stepping into the crucible of transformation, not turning away from love, but preparing to become worthy of it. For true love calls forth not only passion, but purification, and only through the fire of inner reckoning can a man return not as a lover bound by instinct, but as one reborn in consciousness. When a man finds within himself the capacity to love, he is not merely opening his heart to another, he is inviting a force that will deconstruct him. To truly love is not to remain intact. It is to allow one's defenses to be dismantled. This is why so few dare to love deeply. For the man who has spent his life fortifying his ego, defining himself by external success or rational certainties, the presence of a woman who awakens something ancient and inexplicable will threaten that structure. He may feel as though he is losing control, not because the love is wrong, but because it is real. The unconscious, that vast reservoir beneath the surface of our awareness, is stirred by intimacy. The beloved becomes the bridge to that realm. She does not merely exist as herself. She becomes the symbolic vessel through which the man's own hidden nature begins to rise. Often, this feels overwhelming. A man unaccustomed to vulnerability will interpret this as danger, and so he disappears. But his disappearance is not cowardice. It is the psyche's instinctive retreat when it stands before a truth it is not yet strong enough to integrate. To love is to confront chaos, not the chaos of the other, but of oneself. The woman who evokes deep love is often misperceived as the cause of inner turmoil, when in truth she is only the revealer. The love he feels for her stirs something primordial. Memories from childhood, unmet needs, wounds left unattended all come forth under the light of intimacy. It is easier to run than to feel. And so he vanishes. Yet in that vanishing lies the seed of potential transformation. He has touched something sacred, and it has begun its work. Many women misunderstand this silence, this absence, as rejection, but in the symbolic language of the psyche, withdrawal is often a prelude to awakening. The man has entered the liminal space, the realm between what he was and what he might become. In this in-between, no words can be spoken, for he is not yet formed. Like the moon that disappears in its cycle, he too must vanish in order to be renewed. Love, in this sense, is not a path of perpetual presence but of sacred rhythm. The archetype of the lover carries within it not only desire, but danger. It is the most ecstatic and the most destabilizing of all the inner figures. To truly encounter it is to be undone. The man who touches this current may find his dreams shifting, his thoughts turning inward, his sense of identity faltering. It is not uncommon for him to become distant, introspective, and withdrawn. This is not a game. This is not manipulation. This is the psyche entering a symbolic death, so that it may later be reborn. And yet, society teaches us to interpret love only through constancy. We have forgotten the ancient rhythms, the ebb and flow, the pulse of soul that neither calendar nor clock. When a man disappears after loving you, he may be following an instinct older than memory, the instinct to protect what is fragile in himself, the instinct to grow in solitude before he returns to the world of the two. Love awakens the hero's journey, and every hero must pass through the forest alone before he finds his way back. The woman too plays her part in this dynamic. She is not merely a passive recipient of affection. She, in her presence, has summoned the man's soul forward. She has reflected back to him the mystery he cannot find elsewhere, and in doing so, she has become a figure of both beauty and fear, not fear of her, but of what she represents. The unconscious knows that she is not just a woman, she is the anima, the key to the deeper layers of the man's own being. To encounter her is to stand on the threshold of transformation. There is pain in this moment, for both. The woman may feel abandoned, confused. The man may feel ashamed, lost. But if they both understood the language of the soul, they would recognize this not as failure, but as ritual. This is the sacred pause between recognition and return, between projection and integration. The man who has disappeared is not gone, he is becoming. And should he have the courage to complete the inner work, he will one day return not as a shadow of himself, but as one who has faced the fire and emerged whole. Most people want love to be simple, predictable. But the soul does not evolve through simplicity. It evolves through tension, contradiction, longing, and loss. When a man truly loves, he is called to grow, and growth often demands solitude. The chrysalis is a place of darkness. The seed does not blossom in the light, it must first break apart beneath the soil. When the man you love vanishes, consider that he may be breaking open, not breaking away. Do not chase him. To do so is to interfere with his sacred initiation. Just as you would not dig up a seed after planting it, do not seek to interrupt the silence he has entered. Instead, tend to your own soil. For the woman too must undergo transformation. The anima is not merely a projection, she is an archetype alive within. Her power is not in her need to be loved, but in her capacity to evoke love that awakens. In holding her own center, she allows the man to find his. The most dangerous illusion is that love should complete us. True love does not complete, it reveals where we are incomplete. It opens the wound so it may heal. When the man disappears, he may be facing his own incompletion. He may be standing in front of his shadow, that part of himself he denied until love forced it into view. And this confrontation is not gentle. It is storm, flood, and fire, but necessary, for no man can truly offer love until he has met himself in the darkness. And if he returns, she does not return as the same man. He returns changed. He returns with eyes that have seen the underworld, with hands that have rebuilt a new center. And the love he brings is no longer desperate or idealized. It is grounded. It is real. This love is not fantasy, it is forged. And in its presence, the woman, too, is transformed. For this union is not of surface meeting surface, but of soul meeting soul. each having walked alone, now capable of walking together. But sometimes he will not return, not because the love was false, but because the transformation asked of him was too great. Not all seeds break open, not all journeys are completed. This is the tragic truth of the human condition, and yet, even then, love has not failed. For to have awakened the soul of another, even if only for a moment, is to have participated in something eternal. The soul does not measure time, it measures depth. So when a man truly loves you and then disappears, do not reduce it to abandonment. Look deeper, feel what has been stirred within. Let the silence speak. Let the space between presence and absence become your teacher, for in that space the self is calling. And if you truly listen, you may find that the disappearance was not a loss, but an initiation. For both of you, when the soul has been stirred by love, even the silence that follows carries meaning. The man who vanishes leaves behind more than absency, leaves an echo, a presence through negation. To those unfamiliar with the symbolic life, this might appear as mere emotional irresponsibility, but for the psyche, which does not traffic in surface appearances, it is a call inward. The woman, faced with emptiness, is confronted with the space of her own becoming. That which seemed to be about the other now turns inward, revealing something long hidden within herself. It is here that projection begins to unravel. In the earliest stage of romantic love, we cast parts of our soul onto the beloved. The man, too, sees in the woman his anima, idealized and eternal. But such projections cannot be sustained indefinitely. They must collapse not in tragedy, but in necessity. For what is unconscious must become conscious if growth is to occur. When the man disappears, often it is because the weight of his own projection has become unbearable. He must retrieve it, not out of rejection, but in order to own it. There is great sorrow in this stage of the journey because it feels as though the sacred connection has been lost. But this pain, too, is meaningful. One must suffer the death of illusion before the birth of truth. The ego, which seeks control, calls this betrayal, but the soul recognizes it as initiation. When love does not go as the personality had hoped, it often means that the self is guiding us toward a deeper path. The absence of the beloved is not emptiness, but a container for transformation. In the ancient myths, the hero always departs after the sacred encounter. He meets the goddess, receives a gift or a vision, and then retreats into the wilderness or the underworld. This pattern is not mere story, it is a psychic reality. The man who has loved and vanished may be following a mythic thread, unknowingly reenacting an archetypal path. He must go, not because he wishes to hurt, but because the soul demands it. And those who can recognize the deeper current beneath the personal pain will emerge not bitter, but initiated. To the modern mind, shaped by rationalism and instant gratification, such inner processes appear irrational. Why would someone run from love? Why would someone sabotage what is beautiful? But the psyche is not rational. It is symbolic, paradoxical, governed by forces that transcend logic. Love awakens the unconscious, and the unconscious does not yield its treasures without cost. The man who retreats is often walking through a fog of symbols he does not yet understand. To rush him, to pull him back, would be to interrupt the sacred dance of individuation. Sometimes he is not even aware of what is happening within him. He may feel restless, confused, or even ashamed. He may not have the language to explain why he cannot stay. And yet, something in his being knows. He must leave to preserve something essential. It is the call of the soul pulling him toward his own wholeness. The woman, too, must resist the temptation to interpret his silence through the lens of her wounds. This is not about her worth. It is about the soul's timing, which is not the same as the ego's desire. There is an alchemical principle at work here. solve et coagulato, dissolve and to recombine. Love dissolves the fixed identity. It softens the boundaries of the self. But before a new synthesis can emerge, there must be separation. This is the disappearing, the dissolving. It is not the end, but the middle, the crucial phase where the ingredients of transformation are broken down. To interrupt this is to abort the deeper process, but to allow it, to surrender to it, is to participate in the making of something eternal. And yet, this surrender does not mean waiting passively. It is not a call to romantic martyrdom. The woman who has been loved and left is not meant to linger in longing. She is meant to descend into herself. What has been stirred in her is not just emotion, it is archetypal fire. The anima within her is awakening, just as the man faces his own shadows. Both are being asked to evolve. Whether they reunite or not is secondary. What matters is that the soul's invitation has been accepted. True love, in its deepest expression, is not between two egos. It is between two souls on the path to wholeness. And this path is often non-linear. It winds through silence, separation, confusion, and return. Not every love story will culminate in partnership, but every soul story, if honored, will culminate in transformation. The man who truly loved and then disappeared may or may not return, but the love itself has already done its work. It has broken the shell. It has initiated the journey. If he returns, he will not be the same, nor should he be. The man who returns without having undergone the transformation of solitude is only returning out of guilt or fear. But the one who has gone into the fire, faced the dragon of his own unconscious, and emerged with insight that man returns with a gift. And the love he offers is not based on need, but on choice. Not on illusion, but on knowing. He sees the woman not as a projection of his ideal, but as a living soul, separate, whole, and worthy. Likewise, the woman who has endured this silence, who has met her own longing and turned it into power, no longer waits. She does not receive him in dependency, but in sovereignty. Her love, too, has matured. She does not demand his presence to feel complete. She welcomes it if it is true. If not, she remains rooted in her own becoming. For she, too, has walked through the archetypal fire. She has not merely been left, she has been awakened. In this way, disappearance becomes not a betrayal, but a rite, a threshold crossed. It is the space between the known and the unknown, between the false self and the true. Most relationships collapse here because they cannot bear the tension. But those who can hold the space, who can trust the process, often find that what emerges is more beautiful than what was imagined. The soul does not settle for fantasy, it waits for truth. And so, when a man truly loves and then disappears, he is not playing a game. He is entering the arena of the soul. Whether he knows it or not, he is answering a call older than time too. Find himself so that he may truly meet the other, to separate so that he may reunite with presence, to become worthy of the love that first awakened him. And in that becoming, the woman too is made new. For this is not the journey of the man or the woman alone, but of the eternal dance between the masculine and the feminine within us all. There comes a moment, if one is attentive, when the silence begins to speak. What once felt like abandonment reveals itself as initiation. In this quiet space, the woman begins to recognize that what she thought she needed from the man is something her own soul has been calling her to awaken within. The longing was never merely for him, it was for her own inner wholeness, which he momentarily reflected. This is the great secret of projection. It shows us what we have disowned in ourselves. The man, in disappearing, has left behind a mirror. The mirror does not lie, though it may distort. What we see in it depends on the clarity of our inner vision. If the woman is still bound by old narrative estuaries of not being enough, of always being left, of love equating to pain, then she will look into the mirror and see only betrayal. But if she allows the mirror to become symbolic, archetypal, then she will begin to see the reflection not as condemnation, but as invitation. An invitation to step into her own fullness, to reclaim the parts of her psyche she once assigned to the other. Meanwhile, the man in his absence is undergoing his own psychic initiation. If he is conscious, he may begin to understand what has been stirred in him, not just emotion, but archetypal material, mythic patterns, ancestral wounds. He may come to see the woman not as the cause of his confusion, but as the activator of his inner work. He may wrestle with guilt, fear, vulnerability, all the things a guarded ego resists. But if he has the courage to stay with the tension, he begins to peel back the layers of false identity and touch something real. This process is rarely linear. It involves setbacks, regression, dreams that haunt, and visions that illuminate. The psyche does not evolve on command. It unfolds according to its own mysterious logic. The man may try to distract himself, to bury the love, to resume life as it was. But if the love was true, if it touched the soul, then he cannot return unchanged. The image of the woman will follow him, not as a ghost, but as a guide. She is not haunting him, she is his anima calling him home. For the masculine, the anima represents the lost bridge to feeling, intuition, and the symbolic life. She appears first as the beloved outside, but ultimately she must be integrated within. The disappearance, then, is not only a stepping away from the woman, it is a descent into his own unconscious, where the feminine waits to be reclaimed. Until he learns to listen to her within, he will never truly be able to love her without. And so his withdrawal, painful though it may be, is the necessary crossing into that inner terrain. The woman, on her side, is also engaging with her own inner masculine. In the absence of the man, she is forced to cultivate structure, presence, and inner strength. She is no longer waiting to be chosen, his choosing herself. And in doing so, she awakens her animus, not as a protector from the outside, but as a sovereign force from within. She no longer clings to the image of love as rescue. She understands love as a mirror for her own transformation. This is the union. The soul truly longs for not merely the coming together of two people, but the reconciliation of opposites within the psyche. The man, having embraced his inner feminine, returns not as a half-seeking completion, but as a whole capable of sharing. The woman, having embodied her inner masculine, no longer gives from emptiness, but from abundance. Their love, if it meets again, becomes sacred not because it is perfect, but because it is real. But sacred love does not mean the absence of struggle. It means the presence of truth. The man and woman who have walked the labyrinth of the soul do not expect each other to save them. They come with wounds, yes, but also with wisdom. They come not to possess, but to witness, to hold space for each other's becoming. And this space, if held with reverence, becomes a vessel for what Jung called the mysterium conjunctionis, the mystical union of opposites, of masculine and feminine, ego and self, earth and spirit. There may still be fear, even in reunion. The ego resists transformation, even when it desires it. But now, there is language for the fear, there is space for the shadow. Love no longer needs to be pure to be powerful. It needs only to be conscious. And in this consciousness, the disappearance that once caused so much pain is now understood as the doorway that made depth possible. The love has been purified by fire. Not every relationship will survive this process. Some unions are meant only to ignite the soul, not to accompany it forever. But that too is sacred. The man who disappears and never returns is not a villain. He may have fulfilled his purpose. His presence stirred the depths. His absence forced the growth. The soul recognizes the gift, even if the personality grieves the loss. To love is to risk transformation. To stay in love is to be reborn again and again, and each disappearance, whether temporary or final, is part of that cycle. The moon vanishes and then returns. The tide recedes and then floods. The psyche, too, has its rhythms. To honor them is to live in alignment with the deeper truth not of romance, but of the soul's long, slow awakening. And so, in the end, we return to the place we began, but we are not the same. We have journeyed through the terrain of love, absence, projection, and inner becoming. What seemed at first a painful rupture when a man truly loves and then disappears reveals itself not as abandonment, but as alchemy. Something has been transmuted, not merely between two individuals, but within the soul of each. The true purpose of love is not to keep us comfortable, but to awaken what sleeps. It breaks us open precisely because it knows that within our fragmentation lies the seed of our wholeness. The man who disappears is not always fleeing, he is being called. And whether he returns or not, he has served a purpose far greater than romance. He has been the spark that ignited the fire of transformation. And for the woman who is left with silence, her journey is no less profound. She too is initiated into her own depth. The wound of disappearance becomes the doorway into her inner temple. And if she walks through that doorway with courage, she discovers not only herself, but a love that no longer waits or begs or breaks, but simply is. This is the love of the self. The love that does not vanish, because it was never dependent on the other to begin with. We do not often choose the timing of the soul, but we can choose how we respond. Whether the man returns or fades into the horizon of memory, what matters is the becoming, that both individuals are now closer to themselves, for in this, the love has done its work, and perhaps this is the highest love of all, not the one that stays, but the one that awakens. If this journey into the depths of the soul has spoken to something in you, if you felt seen, stirred, or simply more whole for having listened, then I invite you to stay connected. This channel is a place where the soul speaks, where psychology meets myth, and where we remember that even our deepest wounds are sacred. Subscribe to this channel if you feel called, not out of obligation, but out of resonance, because somewhere in these words, you recognized a truth already living within you. And if you wish to walk further on this path together, then I welcome you. Until next time, stay with the mystery, trust the silence, and listen to the voice within.